Hello there, everyone. This is Near-San. This is something I've been thinking about for a couple weeks now, I guess. I don't remember exactly when I first had the idea, but I thought it would be fun, for me anyway, I don't know if it would be fun for you, to sit down and do some kind of podcast-esque thing. I don't want to call it a podcast. I'm a bit hesitant to use that name because I'm not certain that it necessarily fits, but more like I just thought I'd try to do some kind of dialogue with you guys. Once a week was my original idea, and I'm gonna try to do that, but I'm not gonna make any promises. Like if a week goes by and I don't have a good idea for something to talk about, then I'm not gonna like force it. I think that would be painful. But my my idea is to post them on Saturdays, just beneath the regular post, like you found this one. Just a little video. There's not going to be any visual component to the video like there is with the Q&As or with my video about Naruto, just because I'm gonna try to keep this on like a YouTube channel, so I'm gonna keep it PC visually, and also it just makes it easier for me to get it out if the only editing I have to do is to the audio and it's just a still image. So don't worry about watching anything on this. The only reason it's a video is because I think a video is a bit more appealing to play. Like if I was thinking if I was looking at like a website and there was an audio file there to play by itself, just the audio, I probably would be less likely to click on it than like a video file, even if the actual content is exactly the same. And that's the only reason it's a video. Also, YouTube is an easy place to host for streaming stuff. I think it works better than if I had uploaded an audio file to some place that plays audio files. But anyway, for this first episode, I was thinking, and I thought, you know, I haven't gotten a chance to really talk in depth about the Near Hentai Studio concept. So I thought for this first episode, I'll just talk about how that concept came about, my the way I approach it, and what I want to do with it. And that'll be it. And if that interests you, great, keep listening. If it doesn't, there's no pressure to listen to this. Like I'm doing it mostly for myself because I like having these chances to talk about my work or my tastes in stuff or just whatever. I just like having these chances to have these dialogues, so I could just ramble for like 20 to 30 minutes to a microphone, and then putting it up on the site gives me kind of an excuse to do that, basically. So I'm doing this for me. But if anyone does like this, by all means, listen and enjoy it. But don't. There's no pressure. Otherwise, you're not gonna miss anything if you're not interested in the topic. So the idea for the Near Hente Studio started with basically with the character asks. When I started doing those on Patreon, I had kind of a loose idea before that. Like when I was doing some of the one shots, I was trying to think like, where does this take place? And I was like, it's just taking place in like a porn studio. Like don't. I was like, don't worry about the narrative with these too much. It's not super important. So unless somebody specified what kind of background the one shot should have, it just had kind of like a generic bedroom setting, and that was kind of my go-to place for it. With one or two exceptions, that's where they all were, which is like a bedroom, and usually the same bedroom. So I changed it up a little bit here and there. But then when the character asks started coming in, people were asking questions. I don't remember which one it was that first instigated the idea for me, but I was thinking about how they would answer. I was like, well, um, they can kind of answer them completely in character, but at the same time, like they're not like you when you do a character ask, you aren't asking the actual Gohan that is in Dragon Ball Z and that you see on TV or read in the manga. It's like my version of him, which has this different life, but also lives kind of multiple lives. Like my Gohan, there's this, he's in special training, but he's also in a trip to the past, which is not necessarily canon to special training, or like Trunks and Goten, who are both like in their own stuff that takes place in like the Dragon Ball world, but they've also done crossover stuff and been in like the Sleepover Raid comic. So I was like, they're not really like the characters; they're more like actors. So some of the questions, the best way for them to answer it was to treat them like porn stars or like performers who could they were kind of at the same time, they were both the character from the show, but they were also this like performer that would play whatever role I needed them to. And that's how I kind of thought about it. And the more I answered that way, the more this kind of almost like a narrative started taking place between certain characters, or there were characters who kind of ended up developing sort of a chemistry, at least in my head, even if it didn't come through in the actual artwork, but in my head, when I would do like crossover one shots or commissions or whatever, there was these relationships that were kind of building, and the way I looked at the characters, and uh, I don't know, I found it useful to like contextualize everything because I've talked about this in the Q&As a bit, but I need context to derive meaning from something. So, like a porn picture for me that has no context whatsoever doesn't leave an impact. Like it can be an incredibly well designed character who, but if there's nothing in the design to tell me who the character is, or there's nothing in the setting or the acts that are happening to kind of give me some context or let me derive some kind of meaning from it, it doesn't leave an impact and I forget about it almost immediately. So I try not to do that too much. Like obviously it's not like 100% of the time every single picture I release is like has this great story to it, but there's always at least something, at least in my head, and hopefully it comes across in the artwork, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know. And this is speaking just purely about the stuff I make myself. Obviously, commission work is a little bit different because it's not my idea, but I I found this narrative tactic useful, especially once I started thinking more about crossovers, because crossovers inherently remove context from the characters, or remove the characters from their context. That's why when I did Sleepover Raid, which was a commission, but I wanted to I wanted it to make sense to me, so I started developing this idea that these characters in Sleepover Raid, like Jade and Ellie and Gwen and Penny and all of those kids that were in there, Trunks and Goten as well, were classmates. And I was like, okay, so this is not, obviously it's not the world that these characters originated in, but it's like a mixture of those worlds, and into like a one area. There's some time warping stuff because like the Parr family from The Incredibles are in this world, but in their world they were existed in like um, I think it's the is it the 60s that The Incredibles takes place in? I don't remember exactly what decade it is, but the point is The Incredibles takes place in the past. But at the same time, like Penny from Inspector Gadget's there, and her series was modern at the time, but it's like very kind of like 80s, and like Gwen is more like a millennial, and like the characters were kind of from different times. Ellie's from a post-apocalyptic world with plant zombies, like mushroom zombies running around. So like they're from very different worlds. Trunks and Goten's world only resembles Earth in like the vaguest of sense. So they don't they aren't in their own worlds. They're in this kind of mishmash world that I just called the Exoverse, which is spelled more like it should be pronounced like Zoverse, but I always pronounce it Exoverse in my head because in my file naming, I would often use the letters X and O to signify a crossover, like the X for cross and O for over. And so it's just like, okay, it's the crossover universe, Exoverse. Um, and that was useful because then I was able to have the characters kind of already know each other, and it's not overt in that comic, but there are relationships that I had in my head between the characters that play out in the way that they interact with each other. And for me, anyway, it made the comic a lot stronger and more coherent. And then that's carried over into other Exoverse content, like the current ongoing comic I'm doing on Patreon, the Lovers and the Brothers, which is the Hunter x Hunter Boondocks comic, and that's in the same universe, and the same rules apply in order to explain how these characters are together. So the Near Hentai Studio is the other crossover universe that has even less to do with the original world. So in my head, the studio exists sort of between the real world where I am right now talking to you on a microphone and my work, the world of my art, which is takes place in a variety of different worlds. Like most of that work takes place in like some version of the world that the characters originated in. Like I mentioned, special training is kind of like Dragon Ball Z, but it's not literally Dragon Ball Z. It's my new version of it, where there's a lot more fucking, right? So between that world that I created and is purely fictional and the real world, there's this like kind of medium world that's kind of like a almost metaphorical take on the artistic process. Calling it a metaphor might be a bit strong, but you get the idea that it exists between reality and fiction as this place where the porn is quote unquote created. So I imagine this nice sprawling studio lot. Like I'm making it up. Why not go all the way? So it's like a Hollywood studio just for making porn. It's bigger than any real world porn studio, even the biggest ones. It's nice. It's got housing in. And again, this is all in my head. I don't expect most of this to ever come up in my work itself, even in the Studio Tours series, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But there's like some kind of method for pulling characters out of their original settings, or for creating like copies of characters, sort of like a magic remote or something like that, like you would maybe see in something like the Channel Chasers movie or something. But some way of pulling characters into the studio. So once they're there, then they live in the studio, and that's why any character I've drawn before is presumed to be living in this studio. And then when I do a picture of them, they come in to do like a shoot, and that's where the picture comes from. The picture represents whatever they shot, or if it's a comic, it's like a full movie or whatever. And then those are the characters, the actor versions, that answer character asks or appear in the Near Hentai Studio series, which again was sort of just like a way to facilitate crossovers, but now they have this extra level of a narrative that makes them a lot more interesting to me. And again, this is just to me. I don't know if it matters to most people, but for me, having them exist as in this like setting where they're co-workers and they intermingle and they have their own relationships that have kind of developed just from conversations I've had with like people on Discord or in the chat box, or just my own kind of thoughts about how things play out. And then so they're characters who are like friends and hang out with each other in the studio, but are from different series. Like for example, Gon and Killua from Hunter x Hunter are also friends with like Goten, Trunks, and Gohan, who are all, unlike in the show they're from, are all like teens. Or like Goten and Trunks are younger than teens, but like Gohan's not the same age he is when they're that age in the show. Although obviously the Near Hentai Studios probably has some method for like changing age, since like Gohan has appeared at a variety of different points in his life in my work, but his default stage and the stage I draw him at, unless otherwise specified, is usually the Cell Saga era. Like when somebody does a character ask, unless they say that they want a specific version of Gohan to answer, it's always that version. Sometimes Super Saiyan, sometimes not, but it's always around that age. And so that's how I imagine he's kind of living normally. And so like, but those five are all friends and interact with each other behind the scenes, and that's why you sometimes see them reference each other in their asks or things like that. Their friendship is going to play a little bit into some of the stuff I have planned for the Near Hentai Studio. Furthermore, like from what I've drawn, you have it's given me a chance to bring back Sayat Wildstar, who was the main character from Arrow Mugen, which was a comic I did a long time ago. It was just like a fantasy RPG type erotic comic that got like 2 chapters out and then was like most of the way through the 3rd chapter, and it just kind of fell off because of well, that's a whole other story. But basically, it allowed me to bring her back because she's kind of like a veteran character for me. I have other characters that are probably more apt as like representative of like the old me, like characters that I made in high school, where Syed was someone I made in while I was in college. But I like Syed because Aramugan was like a big deal for anyone who followed my work while I was making it. It was the only comic I was doing at that time. This was well before I started special training. I think was the first comic I made after that. But I I like having a chance to use her, and so she's like this, uh, sort of like the head person in charge, where um, she's in charge of talent relations, and she does a lot of like she shows people around. She's the one that narrates the studio tour series, um, and she takes on kind of this administrative role since her ongoing work is pretty much done, at least for now. Like I always think I'll come back to Aramugan, but I haven't in years, and it's pretty unlikely unless something spurs me to. But I like having the chance to use her in that setting, um, and I like the way that I've been able to kind of incorporate other characters who I like and who are popular, but who I don't have a lot of ideas for. One example being Zangia, who is very popular with a number of my fans, but I have no ideas for her because she's just in one movie in the show, in the original Dragon Ball Z. She's just in the one movie, and she doesn't do or say a lot in that movie. She doesn't have any strong relationships with a whole lot of people. So my options with her are either to draw her with other members of her crew, which I don't find particularly interesting. Like for some reason, there's nothing that intrigues me about her fucking the other like Bojack's other men or Bojack himself. Um, I could pair her with Krillin, which is okay, but not super exciting. The most interesting is the third option, which is Gohan, which I've done a few times. I've paired her up with Gohan, but there's only so many times I can draw the same two characters before I start getting kind of bored of that pairing. Because once I've drawn them a few times, I kind of feel like, okay, I did that, you know? But putting her in the studio, she has a more expanded role, and she's kind of taken on a role not unlike Syed, but where she's sort of like a mentor figure to a lot of the more teenage performers. I mentioned in her one studio appearance so far that she's gotten really close to the girls of My Hero Academia as like a role model type figure for them, and has kind of been uh, working with them, and hopefully we'll get to see more of that in future works. Similarly, Clementine from the Walking Dead games is a character that is very popular with several of my followers, but who I have no ideas for because I've never played the games and even hadn't even heard of the character until she was being nominated for one shots on my Patreon. I had never even seen her before. So I've drawn her a few times, but I don't have ideas for her because I don't know any of the characters in that game besides her. I've seen a couple of them just by skimming through footage in order to get reference material, and that's it. So the options with her are to do what I have done, which is to draw her with like Anons, or there was one time I drew her with Carl for a one shot. Carl's a character from the series, the television series, not the games, but I don't like that pairing. It doesn't feel right to me. I don't particularly like Carl or find him interesting. I don't really want to draw him again. So it's useful for me to instead be able to draw her in the studio, and she is going to be appearing in the studio tour series at some point. And if I do any other material in the studio, I'm hoping to be able to tell some more like stories set in the studio. Maybe one day, a few years from now, I could do like a comic with it, possibly. I've been talking with someone um, about maybe doing some fan fiction set in the studio, and I am trying to work on getting a platform for some near hentai fan fiction. Not fan fiction written by me, though that isn't impossible. But the main plan is for some fiction based off of my work, because I've got this one person I'm talking to about doing a studio fic with, and then I've got CCAT in the chat box, who you all know, who has started several stories based on like Applebridge characters and stuff. And if she ever wraps up anything from one of those stories, I would love to host it on the site. And I've got kind of a way I figured out that I might could do that. But that's something that will appear on the site once I actually have something to post, once I have a story to share. But until then, it's just like kind of hopeful. But it would be nice to get some near Hentai Studio fanfics in there. If this person I'm talking to does end up writing some, they'll show up. Maybe I would even write some myself if I ever have the time. It's been a long time since I've done writing, just pure writing with no art attached to it. But it's possible, and if I'm wanting to do more with the studio tour as well, of course. And I've got a ton of ideas for that. I've actually got like 6 or 7 studio tour pics lined up right now that I haven't drawn. I've just done loose sketching for, but they're not like fleshed out to the point that I could start inking them or anything. Only one of them is at that point. I have started it, but I haven't had time to work on it lately. But I've got lots of fun ideas, I think, for different relationships and things that can happen within the studio. So yeah, that's basically the whole idea. I hope that people like it. I know it's really kind of silly and self indulgent, and like as an idea, it's super. It feels super self indulgent, and I feel um, kind of dumb whenever I'm sharing content from it and trying to explain it. But hopefully, this conversation helps to kind of illuminate what I want from this series, but also like what I hope for the series in the future. Um, if not, then I don't know. I just rambled about nothing for 20 minutes. But yeah, so I'm going to end this here. If you liked this, if you made it to this point and you want to see more and you have ideas for things you think I could talk about, I'm open to suggestions. No promises, but if you mention something that I think I could talk about that, then probably I will. Um, but otherwise, if I have a new episode ready by next Saturday, it'll be posted in the same location in the next Saturday's post. If it's not there, I just didn't have an idea. But it'll always be Saturday, just to keep it easy, and it'll always be right here. So if it's not there, then it's not there. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll hopefully talk to you guys then. Bye.